nothing is true, everything is permitted translates perfectly onto game design, as it allows us to take our imagination and weave it onto the fabric of reality. This year at GEC 20, we'll be discussing 100 ways to kill game design and to improve it. The panel consists of Kate Edwards. Kate Edwards is the executive director of Global Game Jam, as well as the CEO of Principal Consultant of Geography, a consultant which pioneered content culturalization. She is also board a member of Take This and is the former executive director of the International Game Developers Association from 2012 to 2017. Following 13 years at Microsoft, she has consulted on many games and non-game projects for BioWare, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Lego, and many other companies. From being named Fortune magazine's 10 most powerful women to being named by GameIndustry.biz as one of their 6 People of the Year, she has also been honored with the Ambassador Award at the Game Developers Choice Awards at GDC 2020. Please give her a huge round of applause. Sadia Bashir, she is a game and product designer, founder of PixelArt's Gaming Academy, and the manager of Game Emerge Conference. She has been working in the game industry for more than 10 years now. She has researched contemporary practices of game development in industry and also extending her research to study traditional and industry-oriented processes frameworks suitable for game development. She has organized multiple game jams, community development events, training courses, and workshops. She is currently developing Travel Dost, a gamified location-based AR tourism tech application. She has been listed as Forbes 30 Under 30 in enterprise technology in Asia and named as the global gaming citizen by Facebook Gaming. Please give her a huge round of applause. Shayan Zaeem. Shayan Zaeem has formed Revolving Games and is currently working on an MMO AAA IP. He also co-founded Caramel Tech Studios. Shayan believes in being involved in his products regardless of the position that he has in the company. Please give him a huge round. I think your work would speak for itself. So starting off, the first question that I have is, why is game design important? Why is it an important
I think, I mean, of course, I first of all, 100 ways to kill your game, I feel that's a very broad way to look at things. So I'm going to narrow it down to, from my experience, and not really in the mobile game industry. Why game design is important is, well, to me, it's very self-explanatory, so it's kind of hard for me to explain why as an executive of a company. But like, it's important because if you don't have your game design down on paper the right way, you're definitely going to make mistakes. And I feel like being a Pakistani working over here and then going to San Francisco, the primary mistake that I feel game designers over here make is that whenever they come up with an idea, they think, oh, eureka, you know, I've come up with the best idea. They don't pen it down. The first thing they do is just like, hey, let's just build a prototype, you know. So I feel like, which we're going to come to later, game iteration, like I think it's part of the process, and I think it's very important. And I feel like, make sure that when you start designing a game, start with the concept, the idea, and make sure you share it with others, because feedback, I feel like, even in the initial stages, is very important. And at times, like over here, we feel like our idea is like our baby and we don't want to share it with anyone. But I feel like you need to start doing that in order to start improving your designs or your concepts. And then coming down to, like, I mean, again, that depends on what kind of genre you're talking about, but let's say it's a story-based game. Make sure, again, that you might be a game designer, but it's always best to get an opinion of someone who might be a narrative designer and who understands what narrative is, as opposed to just being a one-man army and just, you know, trying to, you know, take down and build something all by yourself.
Well, I'll just add my comments. I mean, honestly, with game design, it's like, I mean, it goes without saying, but without game design, you have no game. It's that simple. So, I mean, in all of the things that we do in game creation, the one thing that is utterly unique to what we do as game creators is game design. You will find artists in filmmaking, you'll find writers in television, you'll find these people doing those similar skills in other creative arts, but game design is what makes us what we are, in my view. And so, at its core, I mean, just like he was saying, it's like if you don't have that nailed down to some degree, and understand that the game design is really what you're doing, and all of the other activity is basically kind of like what I alluded to in my talk yesterday, is realizing that design and bringing it to life in all of its glory, and all the pieces that you're putting together. And to me, the genres that we have in game design, like FPS, RTS, RPG, MMORPG, MOBA, whatever you want to, whatever genre you want to talk about, those to me are guidelines. Those are kind of different. Those are different ways of looking at game design approaches, but none of those are set in stone. I mean, we've kind of set them in stone as an industry because we, an FPS becomes successful. Like, well, now we got to make 100 FPSs. Just like when the music games, like all the Guitar Hero and Rock Band became popular, everyone was making a music-based game. Well, how many of those are around now? Like almost none. So, we go through those fads as well, and movies do the same thing, and television does too. But game design is really, at its core, that makes us what we are.
So I want to add my last bit into this, which is with the experience of actually interacting people from across Pakistan and interacting with different studios in Pakistan. I've never seen people actually being serious about a game designer's job. You don't find that game title in Pakistan. Very rarely in some studios you have game designer, but often people even don't really think. I'm sure that a lot of indies just merge this job role into different people, but they don't really realize that that set of skills that is important, and what kind of a role that person has to play, even if you're an artist and a game designer, or a developer and a game designer, but that role is not being really identified as an important part. And also sometimes you and we, all of us, when we try to make a game, we take an inspiration from other games and we try to make the game, but even though we forget that what is taking an inspiration and what is it become, where it becomes a copying just the game idea and just like making it like that. So that's where the game design really plays an important role, to understand what exactly the game design is. And when you're making a game, if you're getting inspired, what is the taking inspiration means, and what is your making your own games means. And that's all the part of the game design practices which you learn. And as a part of any indie team, even if you're two people, if you're making just a developer as an artist, but you also take this role as a game designer to be played within your team, is really, really important, because without your game design, as Kate and Shayan has also explained, that your game is nothing, because all your game people are going to play for, they're not going to play for art, they're not going to play for just see how good the techniques are there or how good the shooting is, but what is the game design, how this entire thing is elaborated in a game. That's it.
So for the next question, we talked about game design being an iterative process. How would you define that iterative process? As game design being an iterative process, what would be the steps that you would identify it as being iterative?
Well, yeah, I mean, game design, like every great creative piece of art, I mean, it does take a certain amount of iteration to get there. I mean, one of the things that I think has become really important in maybe the last decade or so is prototyping, and understanding the value of prototyping as a core piece of game design. A lot of people don't know, for example, when we worked on Gears of War way back when, the first version, it was prototyped as a tabletop game. So they just took like shreds of paper and they just kind of laid them out on a table to kind of see if the game mechanic was going to work and if the level design made sense. And it's like, that is a ridiculously cheap way to prototype, and it's, just kind of see, is this going to work? And a lot of times I think a lot of people I've seen are making more analog games these days to prototype their video games, because it's easy to do, it's really inexpensive. And honestly, at some level, game design is game design, whether it's analog or digital. There certainly are differences, but I mean, if there's like a core game mechanic, sometimes you can kind of work out the stuff within a simple, simple approach like analog. So I think it's really important that, you have an idea. You might even want to start with doing some kind of analog test or like really simple prototyping test. One of the skills I've seen kind of arise in the Western industry are people who specialize just in prototyping. And I know several people, a couple in Seattle alone, where that's all they do. They're a consultant for prototyping. So they will be called in because they do it really well. They know how to implement the prototyping tools very quickly. You know, and within like a few days, they can take a design doc and turn it around and say, okay, this is what I'm interpreting. And it also helps the game designer to see, okay, this is a third party we brought in to do this. That's not what we intended at all. I mean, you know, but that's what we put on paper. That's what we said is our design, but then the way they interpret it is not even close to what we imagined. And so it's really important then to kind of get that feedback. And exactly like you said, you've got to share it with other people and get that input. And don't be offended because somebody doesn't like it. You know, I mean, I always use a feedback mechanism that I always am constructively blunt with people. That's what I tell them. With students and with others, I will be very blunt, which means I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to be constructive. You know, so I'm going to make sure anything I tell you is actually going to help you and not just make you walk away and cry. So.
I think the prototyping phase is one of the most important ones, and I feel like, again, you know, like I'm speaking from the perspective of working in the industry over here, especially upcoming game designers or game studios and the sort of mistakes that they make and that I see. Is first, you know, make your game design doc, get the concepts right, and then you come down to prototyping. Again, that's very important because usually what people do over here is that the first iteration they make is, it's not an iteration. What they do is just completely try to make the game, and you're just not supposed to do that. Again, like Kate said it very nicely. She put it very nicely. She said, "Nothing is set in stone, of course. But there are always some best practices that you need to, you know, follow, and one of them is prototyping. For us, yes. So the MMO that we're building is a very, very strong IP. The first thing we did was we built out a prototype, and there was version 1, there was version 2, and then we came out to version 3, which is going out in March. Unless we don't, these are 3 iterations we made in the last 7 months. And that third iteration is very important for us because we think we now have finally sort of nailed it, and we're gonna go in full production, full swing. Because if you end up making the complete game, it could be a hyper casual, it could be a simple game that turnout period is what, 2 months, 3 months at most, with like what 2 developers at most. If you don't go through that process, you're just not gonna learn. You're gonna just always think that you've made the best, and you probably have not. So yeah, make sure you prototype before you move on to your, you know, product. Yeah.
So I just want to add a little bit tips of iterative process. They have like explained it very well. One of the tip is like, you know, don't just rely on your friends and family for feedback. They always gonna say, it's so amazing, it's so good, but it's not. So if you go to, you're so proud of you, oh my God, it's shooting, oh my God. So rely on real users, like the user you don't know, and you want to take a non-biased feedback. So make sure that you do get that while you're making any game or any kind of product. And the second is the thing is, like, you know, our game, this is from something which I learned from my own mistakes, which is like the game design is an iterative process, and it's already like, you know, you keep changing things, but you make the game design document in the start, and sometimes you forget to update it. And so when you're like, so sometimes one team member leave and then other people came in, so they have absolutely no idea like where you left off and what has been changed. This change is reflected in all the design parts, wherever it's documented, be it's in a theme, be it's in a concept or everything. So you have to keep updating the document that you create for your game design, and you have to document everything, because your team, especially in a larger games and products, like for my team is working for 2 years, and there's a lot of people came and then they left, and then a lot of other people came in. So in between, I mean, 2 years, and if something is going on for like more than 4 years, 5 years, and even within a year, you need to have that document, because the game design document is a communication tool, so it has to be updated. That's my tips.
One thing I feel like happens quite, well, not just here, but like even the small studios that I've interacted with abroad, they don't tend to research. Like in terms of like, if you want to build a prototype, there's a lot of open source tech out there. You can literally jot a game within like maybe a week if you have to. You know what I mean? And you know, like Unity is a great tool, of course, but other than that, like Photon, for example, they might have a free tier for you to test out your multiplayer. You know, so start using them, start integrating them, and you know, like you can come out with a prototype pretty fast. Yeah. So research, please Google away.
So how would you suggest to stay updated on the game design knowledge? Because new games are coming in every year. A lot of games are coming in every year, and as you grow older, the time that you have to spend on games is, you know, less than the time you had 5 years ago. So how would you stay up to date on the knowledge that you have when it comes to, especially in regards to game design?
Well, there's a couple of things that to me are really fundamental. One first and foremost is exactly what you're doing right now. You're part of a community. You're in a room full of other people who are making games, and you're talking to each other, and you're sharing with each other, you're listening to speakers. That is absolutely fundamental, because one of the things I love about working in the game industry is that I think most of us who work in this industry, we don't know everything, and we know we don't know everything, because this art form continues to evolve. And it changes every few years. It's something completely different. I mean, think about games. Think of what just the introduction of touchscreen phones did to the game industry. It radically changed game design when that happened. And so we don't know what the next thing around the corner is. I mean, some people think it's VR, mixed reality, whatever. Maybe, I mean, it could be some other device that we don't know about yet. And so, but we learn about that. We stay agile in our approach because we talk to each other. And we figure out, hey, did you hear about this trend? Or what do you think about this? The other thing I think is really important is, you know, there's a lot of resources out there in game design. I mean, speaking of community, like when I used to run the IGDA, there's a game design special interest group that's on Facebook. Go join it. Anybody can join it. You don't have to be an IGD member. Just go join the group, you know, and you can introduce yourself and say, hey, here's my prototype, or here's, you know, I'm looking for resources on this or that or whatever. I mean, that's one of the things I also love about this industry is that it's very rare that people don't share with each other. They love talking to each other. They love being collaborative and sharing their knowledge with each other. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about this industry. And the other thing too is basically, and I know you kind of said, it's the challenge of being able to play games, but you know, the advice, like when people say, I want to be a screenwriter, I want to be a filmmaker, well, what's the advice they get? Well, then you need to be writing. You need to be making films. Like when I meet students who say, I want to be a game creator or a game designer, so my first question is, what are you doing right now? You know, besides your school projects, what are you actually working on the side? Because every person who is in part of a creative media, you have that compulsion to do it. So it's like you can't help yourself. So if you're an artist, you create art. If you're a writer, you write. If you program, you create code. You know, if you're a game designer, you're constantly thinking of new ideas. And even if you create 50 of them and then you throw out, you know, 49, but that's what you do. And if you're not doing that and you don't feel compelled to do it, I've often told students, you might be going into the wrong industry if you don't feel that compulsion to do it.
So I'm just gonna add to it, right? So I feel like to stay up to date, of course, is just, you know, keep on playing games, but that does not mean just play games in terms of, like, for example, like FPS. Just don't play FPS only. You have to be eclectic in your approach. Play all sorts of games. It's the same with music, you know. You might like rock, you might like, I don't know, jazz, but you should listen to everything. Unless or until you don't listen to everything, you're never gonna improve. So that would be my advice. Personally, that's, you know, if you take a look at my phone right now, I wasn't a primarily a mobile gamer initially. Now I am, but I've always been a PC gamer. I used to love strategy games, then I moved on to playing FPS only because I didn't have the time. So, you know, like a couple of my friends would join me online. But then Fortnite is the target audience, their primary target audience is a much younger audience, I believe. It's not something that I was very much naturally attracted towards, but I played it for quite a bit. I just got my Victory Royale like 2 days ago, my first Victory Royale. I don't need to play that game, but they keep on updating that game with such amazing, you know, things that I want to stay up to date. You know, I don't have the time to, but I still make an effort, constant effort, conscious effort. And I, like, for myself, like, I am more of there's a game called Apex Legends by EA. I'm more of, yeah, I love that game, right? So that's also a battle royale. But then again, like I said, I'm still playing Fortnite from time to time because I feel like what they've done for the game, like the way that they've written the game design and how they've changed the game over time. If you had played Fortnite when they initially released it, it felt like it was like a prototype. It still says beta on top, by the way, just so you know. Yeah. And now the game has just transcended into a beast. Like you're just like, wow. Like if you look at the smallest details of like how some a character might be wearing a backpack, but it'll have a dog inside of it, but it's so anime. Every little thing, right? So yeah, technology's come so far, but so has game design, and it'll keep on improving. Like she said, how tablets have pretty much disrupted the industry. I think mobile industry is about 130 billion. The game industry in itself, like in total, right? But mobile takes about 50 to 60 billion of that, which is insane. So there's a lot of growth, and it's always going to keep on happening. But just make sure that you always play games of all sorts. Don't stick to one, just because you love it. Yeah, that's the only way you could open your mind.
Thank you. You guys have added almost everything. So for the same reason what Shayan just said, I used TikTok for 3-4 months just to get the idea what the hell is this people is talking about. So we need to see, and we wanted to target TikTok ads, and we need to understand what kind of audience is there. Is it for us or not? What kind of a content is being created there? So even if you are not, and see, one of the studios that we work with, we used to work on role-playing, hidden object, casual games. And I never played such kind of games, but for 1 month before creating any game title, we made multiple game titles over there. Our job was to just to go to office and play a lot of games. And then end of the month, we would create a report of what are the new things that people has introduced in the game design of this genre, which are the top games that are going, what kind of audience they have and stuff. But it's also research based. Sometimes you're just playing for research, not for playing for fun. I know it doesn't sound fun, but it is like it's one of your job as a game developer to actually know what kind of games that you're making. And another thing is a lot of international conferences, they release their all talks online. Some of GDC, after few years, they make their previous year's talks public. And I think there's a lot more data on YouTube just alone for every different conferences. You can listen to the talks, and from there you can actually find whatever the field you want to work in, even it's AR, VR, whatsoever. You find the people, the presenter, and the speakers, and you can follow them on Twitter, and you can follow their up-to-date work as well. So there's like a world out there. You don't have to just think what you can get here. The entire world is open to you. The Twitter is a very good platform to follow people, and for people always like sharing their current work, current projects, and you can start learning about that. And depending what field and what genre you want to explore, you can find a lot of content out there as well. And we will be posting these videos online as well.
So we had a game we worked on, and it did about 15 million in revenue in the last year and a half or two. That's great, but we made a mistake. We made a mistake was the game design, everything is perfect. It's still relevant to date, but there were certain small little things that we should have made updates of, and we didn't. So there's another studio that I'm not going to name, but they recently came out with the same game, and it's exactly like if you play it, it's exactly 100% copy of our game, but it's racking $1 million a month, right? And why is that? Is simply because yes, they have a Rockstar team. That's one thing. They have the budgets to market it. That's one thing, but they have done something that was just like wow. The artwork at times people underestimate what artwork, like even for Fortnite, that artwork works very well for the younger audience. We should have updated the artwork in the recent times. We didn't, and that artwork right now is very much relevant. The way they've done 3D modeling, I think they make their characters in 3D, but they, I think, render them out in 2D. It looks 3D, but it's not, as far as I know. But they've just executed that. That execution has just been done so well, and I mean, they've made the same amount of money within 12 months that we made in like about 2 years. So yeah.
One game design failure that stuck with you and you're learning from it.
Sadia's like, oh my God, there's so many.
Sadia can take the most time out of this.
Yeah, Sadia, we'll let you take this.
I'm just laughing at the game design idea that I'm going to tell, because I posted a tweet few days ago that if you ever feel stupid in your lives, we have done the most stupid thing in the world. So we made a game in which you play as a mosquito, and you have to get the blood from a guy sleeping, and fill the bottles with the blood. And it's 12 years ago that when we made this first, and at that time I had absolutely no idea what the game design was, because we just graduated, we had no game design education, and we just started our own stuff, small team to make games. The problem was like the why I'm sharing it, because we made that game and we like literally made everything, and we never shared it with anyone what we were doing, and we just made it, and then one day when we just created everything and then we tried to like share it with people, and we find out like it's not something everybody enjoys, and we really don't see that people really, and neither our bosses were happy with that either. It's like idea. So at that point, like that was one failure. Then another failure is not just the game design failure, games, how you execute the game design. That's also one thing is the game design. We made a prototype for this one turn-based strategy game, which was so good at a paper prototype, and we played with several people. But then we made it in 3D, and in 3D it took us longer time, and the execution is not as cool as it was in a paper prototype of 2D. And then we figured out if we made a game in a 2D, it would have been much easier for execution and it also like for the mobile screen, it was much easier for you people to actually work on that. So that is another design failure. It's kind of a design failure because we couldn't figure out this design which is really good on the 2D platform, which is actually the physical prototype, but when you play it, you can see the game art style from the top, and that's what people really wants to see. And we made it in 3D and isometric, which is like a kind of a failure which we learned. The game is still under production for since 2 years. We are trying to change it into 2D now. Probably will. But that's the kind of a things that is very crucial in the game design, and some things you learn with the time and from your failures. And one other thing that since we are teaching academies, or every year a lot of our students has to make like game design, entire game design, and then as a team they have to, entire batch has to make a game. So the designer makes design, the developers develop the game, the artist will make the art, and they have a collaboration every month. So sometimes we let them generate the ideas so they can understand the entire process. A lot of time people come with such big game ideas like similar to Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed or something, and then we ask them like, how are you going to make it? They're like always very enthusiastic, we are going to make it. It's like, you have 3 months, you know that. They're like, yeah, we will do it, we have this, we will do this, and we'll do that, and they just keep going on with that. So sometimes we let them do that. So when one time a team came to me, they told us like, we are going to make a game which has a 3D perspective camera, but at one point it will become a FPS and this and that, and I let them do that, because 5 months later they came to me and then we got the camera running. So that it's like, I'll let you do that. You'll come to me and then I'll let you know that this was not a viable. Then they agreed to me that this was not. But sometimes you need to let people do things and then learn from that, but sometimes you can learn from others' mistake. Learn from my mistake. Share your game as early as possible, and don't share it just with your friends, because they'll always say it's all cool, and then when you go to the actual user, they'll be like, no, we don't want mosquito game.
Anyone can come up with the same idea that you probably someone has already that you've thought of. It's always the execution. Sadia, Kate, and I might think of the same idea, but we might all execute it differently. So one way it might work, maybe 2 ways it might work, mine might not work. Do you know what I mean? So idea actually holds no value. Sorry to break it to you guys, but
I think I've seen a lot of really bad game designs over the years, but one that comes to mind that's really clear is that there was a game in the early days of the Xbox that was being designed with a theme that would appeal to Native American players, and which there's a certain large contingent of those in North America, and so the design though was so flawed from the start. So first of all, it was an all-white team making this game. There was no Native American indigenous people helping create this game. And the other part of it is that they took, the main character was a totem pole. And a totem pole, if you know, is a sacred object to a lot of the tribal groups in where I live in Seattle. It's very iconic, but it's also a sacred object. It's not something you turn into a character. You know, even though there's been a lot of movies and there's been, you know, you can go to Legoland and they have like a big Lego totem pole and stuff next to a Sioux Indian tent, which makes no sense at all. But anyway, they took the totem pole, they turned it into a character, and it would run around, and one of the things that it would do is like shoot fireballs at animals. If the animals were like doing things like damaging the forest, like a beaver, you know, chewing the trees, making the trees fall down. Well, that's what beavers do, because that's how they build their homes. They make dams on rivers, and that's how they survive. And there is no way that the Native American, a Native American person would say, well, that's what should happen, that you would kill an animal. You know, a totem pole would kill an animal who's just doing what they do. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so basically, there were a lot of other things about this concept that were so flawed that by the time I was brought in, they said, well, what do you think about the idea? And I said, I think this site needs to be shut down, like finished, because there's no redeeming this. There's no way you're going to redeem this at all. And so eventually that's what happened. They basically closed the project down, and they'd already spent like around 300,000 US to develop this game. And then it was, you know, so that was a lot of wasted work. But all they had to do was like bring an idea like that. I mean, not just to me, but to other people. They could have asked any, you know, Native American person within the company, what do you think of this idea? They would have said, no, not a chance. But they didn't do that.
So, designer's block. Has any one of you faced that? And if you have, how did you manage to come out of it? And what would be the advice that you would give to other game designers that if they do face this, how should they deal with it?
I think my simple answer to this is teamwork. Well, I'll let my team bring the ideas. And then we can mix and match and see that what's working, what's not working. And this not for that you cannot always bring the best designs, and you may not be able to always think that like what's a design process is always like, it's kind of like a teamwork, and it should always be. So you would not get that kind of a designer block. You know, when you have more people involved, they actually let you see like from a different perspective, everyone. Like, you know, in your team, sometimes people think that only it's game designer's job, but to be honest, like when we bring our artist, designer, marketing person, everybody to sit together. It's like, okay, tell us, maybe we take their ideas or not, but whenever they talk about something, any idea, and sometimes they have different perspective and really out of the box ideas they give us, which we never thought of, because sometimes your perspectives are so linear, maybe about one genre, one strategy, one thing that you have been seeing all around. Maybe you have not seen it from other people's perspective, so that really helps.
I think a lot of times, I mean, we have to go back to like really simple things. I mean, I hope most everybody has somewhere or something that they consider like their source of inspiration. You know, and some creators call it like their well of inspiration. It could be reading a book that you like. It could be watching the same movie again. It could be going for a hike in the woods so you kind of clear your head and sort of recharge not only your physical self, but also just your mind, kind of, step away from the creative process and the pressure, you know, and just kind of get away. And I'm not saying you have to do this for a month. I'm just saying you could even do it for an afternoon. You just have to separate yourself from the process and distract yourself. And I think a lot of times, I know that you know, there's been a lot of great studies done about human psychology, where like when you're doing something that you do well, kind of without thinking, like let's say if it's just you go for a run, or you do something like you're playing an arcade game that you don't even really have to think about because you've played it 1,000 times. But while you're doing that activity, your brain is like kind of thinking about other stuff, and it's often kind of loosens up the creative flow, and that's really what it's about. We have that flow that we get into where ideas just sort of come out in a very organic way, and it's kind of restoring that flow is what it's all about. And so we have to find different ways to do it. It's going to be different for everybody. I mean, but you have to find that source, and you have to be willing to step back, because oftentimes the number one mistake I see, which is one of the reasons why I'm so active in the mental health organizations involved in the game industry, is because I see people get so much anxiety and so much self-doubt, and they start getting just in this horrible downward spiral because they try and force it. They're like, I have to figure this out today. I have to figure this out this week. but sometimes the great ideas, they don't happen like that, so you've got to back off, you've got to allow yourself to have that space.
For me, it's, in all honesty, like I've had to get out of it in different ways at different times. It's never been the same for me each time. Sometimes it was like literally I would take a trip somewhere. It could be locally, it could be abroad, whatever. Sometimes it was literally, for example, if I'm working on a casual space or a mid-core space, like I would literally start playing different games of the same genre constantly, thinking how could I do it differently? Do you know what I mean? Sometimes what worked for me was I would just go, like I took a meditation class once for 10 days straight, and that worked for me. So every time it's been very different for me, but so, I mean, from my personal experience, I think, like she also mentioned earlier, like it's different from everyone. So of course, different ways could work. So I would say try everything that I said, or maybe, whatever you think could possibly work for you. But like she said, don't let it turn into something that is bigger than it is. Like, don't go down that, that rabbit hole, because it's just, it's not worth it. It'll take a mental toll on you, and just try to relax. It'll all come, it'll all be okay in the end. It always is. Yeah, just hang in there.
So strictly from an indie game idea perspective, when we're entering into the gaming industry and we come up with an idea, we're very attached to that idea. Or the initial ideas that we have, we're very attached to them. How do we figure out that we need to let go of a certain idea, that it's not a viable idea or it's a bad idea, without really going into halfway through production or spending a lot of time and money on it? What would be the right time to dissect the fact that this is not a good idea and we need to let it go?
I've got a good little story for this one. So I had three students came to me, game design students, and they were not local to Seattle. I think they were from Florida. But anyway, they found me online and they contacted me on Skype and said, hey, we've got this game design pitch. We have a pitch that we put together in PowerPoint, and we want to pitch it to you and practice. So we want to practice with you. Will you do that for us? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So we got on a Skype session, and I warned them, I said, I'm going to act like a VC. So I'm going to warn you, and I'm going to act like a Silicon Valley VC. So just be warned. Now, they didn't know what that meant, so they found out pretty quickly. So they started their pitch deck. Now, their pitch deck was a disaster. They spent 15 minutes, and I'm not kidding. So right away, the pitch was too long. It should have been like 5 minutes. But 15 minutes telling me about the backstory of the world they created, because they were so proud of it. And so I let them go on and on because I wanted to make this hurt when I gave them my feedback. So, but they just, this was like fallacy number one. Well, they were so proud of with their own creation, and yet it was so derivative. It's like, okay, I'm seeing Lord of the Rings, I'm seeing Game of Thrones, there's all this stuff they threw in there. I'm like, there's nothing original in this world they created at all. And I'm just kind of rolling my eyes on the other side of the screen. And so finally, when they kind of got to a certain point, I said, okay, stop. I said, get out. I'm going to hang up now. And like, what? Wait, what happened? I said, get out of my office. We're done. It's like, I don't want to hear any of this. It's like, you haven't even told me how I'm going to make money. You're trying to get money out of me to make your game. I want to know how you're going to make me money. So I said, you didn't even get to that point yet. You're telling me about your stupid world that I don't care about. I said, all I want to know is what kind of game it is, who's your target audience, and how are you going to make me money? How much money do you need from me, and when am I going to make that back? If you can't tell me that in like the first minute or two, I don't need to listen to you, so go away. And so then we kind of, then I actually gave them constructively blunt feedback, and I said, here's the ways you can improve this. And so I gave them a lot of advice. So about 3 months later, they came back to me, and they said, we want to pitch to you again. And I'm just like, ugh, okay. So I wanted to see if they learned anything. So they did. The pitch deck still was not great, but it was a lot better. And this was interesting. So I think it was the third slide, and they were moving quicker. They got rid of all that derivative stuff about their world, although they didn't change the game, though. It's still the same world and everything. So I'm just kind of like, how are you going to compete with Lord of the Rings and all that stuff? But anyway, They got to their third slide and it said monetization. And so they described their monetization model, but they did it super quick. So they basically said, okay, here's how we're gonna make money with this game. This is how we monetize the game. And I was reading it and I'm like, and then they went on to the next slide without really explaining it. And I'm like, whoa, wait, go back to this slide and step me through this. Because what I saw, you know, having been working in this industry for a long time, they came up with a monetization model that I had never seen before. And it was actually pretty brilliant. I said, this is a really smart idea, you know, and they said, oh, well, thank you, you know, so then I said, you know what, I said, honestly, and I said, if I were you guys right now, I said, what you've just defined yourself, you are a company that specializes in monetization models, because this one slide, if you can develop this one slide into something viable as like a service you sell to game developers, this could be like a major big deal. So I said, you're terrible game designers. So don't bother, you know, everything you've created, everything you pitched to me is derivative, but this slide could be an entire business of its own. And they are like, really? You know, well, we just thought sounded cool. I'm like, it is cool because I haven't seen anyone do this before. And so I said, if I were you, I'd go talk to a lawyer like today and see if there's, you know, they can, you know, check and see if this idea has been patented or something. And I never heard from them again, so they probably owe me some money. But it's just one of those things where, you know, to that point where you need to get that honest feedback from somebody who's a third party, you know, who's willing to kind of mentor you. And I think finding a mentor is a great way to do that. I mean, you need to find people, and there's tons of people in this game industry that you can reach out to on LinkedIn or other online places if you don't meet them in person, who are more than willing to give you feedback. You know, like I'm sure a lot of you know who Chris Avallone is. He's a famous writer. He's worked on all kinds of stuff. He used to be at Obsidian Entertainment. He always serves on my panels that I do at San Diego Comic-Con, and he does mentoring and all this stuff because he has a huge heart for helping people who are coming into this industry. And as famous as he is, he always finds time to help people out, and I think that's awesome. And there's a lot of people like this in this industry. So I would say if you really want to, you know, kind of get a sense of, are we going down the right track, just talk to someone who has experience, you know. And sometimes it could be just one person who's a veteran game developer who can give you just a half hour of their time, and that could just kind of change your whole course of direction, potentially.
I would just say, honestly, like we initially touched the subject, like, just get a feedback. And if you're an indie developer, like, if you're just starting out, just so you know, you do not have all the answers, nobody does. Yes, nothing is set in stone, but there are certain things that you do need to follow to have a good basic game design. Make sure that you, again, just because you're an indie developer and you think that you've made something that is very different, unless someone like Kate approves it, you know, you need to make sure that you're going to someone who actually knows their stuff before, you know, like going out to like maybe your mom or your dad, hey, you know, we built this, oh, this is great, son, this is great, daughter, but it may not be, you know what I mean? I guess that's my, you know, 2 cents on it. I've had some indie developers, you know, show me their game design stuff. At times I was not as honest as maybe Kate is. I didn't necessarily compliment them, but I didn't discourage them as well. I mean, not technically discouraging when you're, you know, giving a constructive criticism, but sometimes people take it that way. But I just feel like just keep an open mind, that's it. Whatever you have is not necessarily the best, and it may never be the best. It might work, you never know, you know, but just keep at it, just keep improving, keep those iterations going on and on. And yeah, just a little tip on, again, this is from mobile specifically, A/B testing is very important. And all the studios that even the executives at the studios, the small studios that I've met over here, you guys really need to start doing that. You know, one icon, just because you think that this, I don't know, micro dinosaur looks really cute, and, you know, just because it's cute doesn't mean that there's an entire world out there. They might not think the same way you think. So, you know, make 3-4 icons, for instance, you know, try them out. Even in terms of monetization, there are multiple ways to do it in the same genre. Try out at least 2 ways before you know, move on. Again, this is way down the production, into your production, but you need to do these things. These are small little tips I'm just giving out because I've seen people not doing it. So yeah.
So I think I'm done with all the questions, and now I think the audience should ask the questions. So if anyone wants to ask anything from the panelists, please raise your hand.
Question for Kate. Since you didn't get any call from a lawyer or the original authors about signing an NDA, is it possible for you to share the monetization idea?
I'm not going to, sorry. No, that would not be fair, even though, no, I did not sign an NDA, but I also respect the fact that they're the ones who came up with it, so, yeah, I'm not gonna, hit them in the kneecaps when I'm halfway around the world.
Ask her off the record. Could you at least tell us their names?
I actually don't even remember off the top of my head. No, this was like 3 years ago, and you know how many people I talk to every year? It's like, they were like maybe 3,000 people ago. So I still have their PowerPoint, but I'd have to look it up.
I have a question. Since you're talking about 100 ways to kill your game design, and what if you've repeatedly killed it and you keep trying to resurrect that thing back, right? So there comes this point in time where you've written it too many times, you've got too many notes, the idea keeps changing, but you want to do something, but it becomes too close, and so what do you do? I don't know how to communicate it, but what do you do if you're trying to make something which is kind of like your dream, like your passion project, and how do you really make sure that you know when to say no, that's enough, and kind of scope down or something like that,
I mean, first I would like to say that open the Webster dictionary. I'm not saying it to you directly, I'm saying it to everyone. Know what passion actually means, because I meet a lot of people who think they're very passionate about something, but they're not. They think they are. Secondly, so I have two ways of looking at this. I have two perspectives. One is like if I look at from where I stand now and my position, I need to look at it from a very business, oriented perspective. I'm just like, okay, if this is not working for me in the next 3 months, 4 months, I'm gonna kill it. I may or may not have the resources, I'm gonna move on. But thinking from a perspective like maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago when I was actually sitting down writing game design, like she asked earlier, how do you let go of that idea and you keep trying to resurrect it? Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's like, learn to let go, man. It may sound very simple, but you need to learn to let go. It may, maybe after 10 years, that idea might be relevant, and you might actually come up with something that might make more sense of it, and you can always work on it again, because it's always going to be there. That's pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I just think, just to second that, is that you need to walk away. I mean, you can set a time limit for yourself and say, if I don't really figure this out within 3 months or 6 months, I'm going to put it on the shelf and walk away and work on something else. And it kind of goes back to our early discussion about how you get your inspiration and how do you like recharge. And a lot of times this is an example of a lot of ways that game designers get stuck, because they get so obsessive, quote, passionate about the idea, but it's not passion, it's more obsession. Like, this has to work, it must work. It's like, well, there's a lot of people throughout history who've tried to make anti-gravity work, and they didn't, and so, but they keep trying. So, at some point you gotta realize we just don't have the technology or the knowledge to make it happen, so I'm gonna go work on something else instead. And like you said, I mean, you could come back to it later, and maybe there will be a time where you might have that kind of lightning strike moment later where you suddenly figure it out, now I know how to fix that problem in the game. But that's because you're like 2 or 3 games later, and I think you gotta give yourself that distance. Or if you're not able to pull away from it, then you need to have trusted friends around you who could basically like physically separate you from your laptop, or have them go in there and delete your game and say you're not working on this anymore.
So my question's for Sadia as well as Kate, but it's separate questions. So for Sadia, I want to ask, you touched upon a very good point of game designers' job being absent from the industry at all, because I've worked in a couple of indie houses in Lahore, and the longest I lasted was 4 to 6 months with the second one, and the first one was 2 to 3 months, because that was my first exposure to ASO. And with the second one, the 4 to 6 month contract, they were still paying some guy named Ivan in Russia $50 to $150 per game ideas, instead of storyboarding, coming together, and they were also gamers like myself. Like we were discussing Horizon Zero Dawn, the themes of it, what we thought of the ending, and more. So, what do you think we can do to tackle the idea that game designers are also a job? That a game field is not just people with ID and art. It's also involving people who can tell good stories and can be a part of that art process as well as a development process, because they can participate in telling what part of this engine is useful for me telling my narrative, and for the art people as well, that art can be through my words and art can also come from your pictures. So how can we change that in the education system?
So education system. So one thing is like you just said that, like, you know, in our previous discussion as well, we don't have a lot of game universities in Pakistan which is actually, like, you know, really elaborating the game design or game art, or how many fields is in a game development. Like recently university has started teaching game development and games related courses as well, but still a lot of, even the teachers, even the people are very, very unclear about that. So one thing is to actually be work with universities, which we are trying to do. So to do some kind of orientations and all these kind of things to actually make aware students about what kind of roles they can get into. The second thing is about the industry, because a lot of people in Pakistan do not want to hire too many resources, and not even permanent resources. So if they want to have a game design idea or want to have a game designer, so that they would rather just go to freelancer and pay somebody to get it done rather than hiring a person. The other reason is like not having the right skill set, because a lot of people who are self-taught, I mean, they do pretty good job, but without really having, you know, working in for quite a bit of time and having an experience of that kind, you can actually get to call yourself, okay, fine, I have this kind of experience, now I have this kind of variety of expertise in this variety of genres of making games. So we don't really get to have that experience because nobody is hiring a game designer. So that is this like kind of a chicken and egg situation, like what we do, like, you know, can we force the studios to do that? No, but we can submerge this role into different roles. For example, if you're an ASO, you can also start learning about game design and contributing to that. I mean, of course, that having a game designer title is not easy. Not everybody is going to give you that. But that my initial discussion was based on that, because we understand that we are a smaller industry and we have small studios, we have sometimes 2 or 3 people working in the team, even if you're 2 people, but you need to keep the role present. Even you are doing it, you yourself was doing it, understanding and learning it yourself is better. But, you know, it's overall the decision of the studio owners and the, you know, executive people, what they want to do, they want to freelance it or they want to hire a person is different, but you can always encourage them to let you work on this and you can learn on yourself. Maybe if you start putting the like more efforts and you start showing the good results for that, maybe they can stop paying the other people, maybe they'll pay, you know, make you work on those things as well. But it's okay if you don't have a designer game design title, but try to keep the role present there. That is the more important, I think.
And my second question is for Kate. So over the last few days, you've talked about culturalization and localization. Now, with the flourishing of the Pakistani gaming industry, inshallah, we're hoping to move up from mobile games towards PC, VR, AR, and hopefully one day consoles.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, as a Southeast culture, because I think you're well aware that we are also a bit tone deaf when it comes to religious, social, cultural values. How do we make sure that in this part of the world we don't do something similar to what the Japanese and what white people in America do, that we do something intentionally or unintentionally because it might create sales? Because again, drama might lead to sales at times. You know, you deliberately make a controversial game knowing it will create sales, and then later on you patch it after it's done 15,000, 20,000 sales on Steam. So how do we, instead of approaching a company like yourself, which, you know, we might not have the budget for, what can we do as a basic foundation for ourselves that we can say, research, look up, or understand that there's so many cultures across the world? How can we make sure that what we're making does not impede upon their own culture, their identity, through gestures or anything else?
Right, that's a great question. I often get asked that question when I give culturalization lectures, like how do we know what we're supposed to know? And the answer is that you're never going to know everything. I mean, I don't know everything. It's like one time I gave a lecture in China, and based on my topic, the guy stood up and he said, so based on what you just told us, can you tell us which types of games will be most popular in the United States in 5 years? It's like if I could tell you that question, the answer to that question, I'd be living on a private island somewhere. You know, I can't. Nobody knows. Nobody knows that kind of stuff. But the point is that you do need to do research. There's no question about it. But at first, before you do research, you have to have a certain self-awareness of what you're actually creating. So if you're creating a game that has religious themes, it might be fantasy religion. It has nothing to do with the real world, but you've got some kind of faith system in your game. Well, if you're doing that, then you automatically should be thinking about, well, is our system, is it similar to Islam, to Judaism, to Christianity, to Buddhism? I mean, is it mimicking any kind of real world religion? Is it going to make somebody upset, you know, because we're like taking theirs and then we're kind of tweaking it somehow? So you have to think about that. I mean, if you have any kind of political system in the game, or you are using political allegory, like you're taking, you know, like what's going on in the UK right now, or the US, you know, you're making a figure that's sort of Trump-like, you know, or something like that, which probably a lot of people would enjoy. But, you know, but you have to think about, like, are we sending a message through our game that we don't want to send? Because we just happen to use a character that's similar to, like, a living political figure. So that kind of stuff, you have to be self-conscious about what you're creating, and that requires you to kind of step back. And now, most game developers I know, including indie developers who do this kind of stuff, they are self-aware. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid. I mean, they're not like blindly like, I'm just making a game. No, they know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to do it intentionally. I think that to the point of doing controversy, intentional controversy, it seems like it could be a quick win because you will get press, you'll get noticed, but you'll also get a lot of hate. And basically, I don't think that's a path. That's like, honestly, that's, you know, to use a Star Wars analogy, using controversy to sell your game is going to the dark side. Because ultimately, it's the quick and easy path, but it's basically a path to destruction, you know, to sound like Obi-Wan, so, or Yoda, or whoever. So you have to be very careful about that. It's really seductive to try and do that in a game, but it also often backfires, especially because, like I mentioned in my lecture yesterday, a lot of times in certain communities around the world, they don't forget that you did that. So then if you come out with your next game in which you are not trying to be controversial, they'll say, well, yeah, but I remember your first game really pissed us off, so we're not going to sell your game here. So you have to have that self-awareness about what you're actually putting in your game, and once you have that self-awareness, you have to take the steps to research. And you could use Wikipedia, and you could use other resources out there. You could also sometimes, like there's using stuff like Quora. If you have access to Quora or other like Q&A systems online, you know, if you ask a question, hey, is like, let's say you come up with a character art and you post it as a question on Quora, and you say, do you think this would be sensitive to people in the Pacific Islands? And you target people in the Pacific Islands. Well, because it's the internet, you're gonna get a lot of noise. You're gonna have people trolling you instantly, you know, so you have all these stupid answers coming back, but you will get some people who answer honestly and say, well, hey, I'm from Tahiti, and I think what you just posted, I don't really like it, and here's why I don't like it. So that's a really easy and free way to get some kind of feedback. Now, it's not going to be super well researched. It's not like asking a university professor, but that's another way to do research. You can go to a university and, like, say you find somebody who's working in social science or history or politics, and say, hey, we have this idea we're putting into a game. Do you think this could be sensitive? And it doesn't have to be even a local university. It could be some professor you found online somewhere at a university somewhere else. And oftentimes when you're seeking that kind of feedback, all you're looking for is what the knee-jerk reaction is going to be. And I mean, what would the most common person, if they see it, how would they react to that? Now, you're not going to make your game offense-free, because, like I mentioned yesterday, there's always someone out there who's going to be offended by everything. You know, so that's not your concern. The main thing is making sure that you haven't put something in your game that's really going to like piss off a majority of people in a certain market. So you do your research to avoid that. And even if you put something in your game that you do think might be a problem in some markets, as long as you can defend your choice, That's really what matters. You can say we put it in our game because it makes sense, because our narrative is this and this character does this. If you can explain logically why you made that decision, that oftentimes can help people understand that it wasn't just a random thing you did just to make them angry, or to be offensive towards them. It's not that difficult to do this, but it does take time, and it does take an extra level of diligence to kind of step back from your own creation and kind of look at it from that lens, and if you can't look at it through that lens, then you have to use like some of these online tools, like finding a professor or using Quora or something to find out what other people are going to think. And that's the cheap and easy way to do it, but it does take time to do it.
I know the question was for the ladies, but I'd like to add to something what the question that you asked, Sadia. So if I was in your position, what I would do is, I don't know, I'd make a fake profile under a Russian name called Sergey Lomachenko or something like that, and I would, post that idea and make sure, because I'm sure your execs emails, send them an email, hey, you know what, I have an idea, get $50 from them, from there, and you're probably getting $30 in general anyway. So why not, man? That's an opportunity right there.
That didn't occur to me because this was like right after graduation. I was poached by them in the career fair, so I didn't have that much awareness then. And honestly, I got fed up of ASO, so I didn't think that far.
Try it out, man. Let me know how it goes.
I'll try again.
Okay, I have a question. So a lot of indie developers, at least I've joined some Facebook groups, and I see some indie developers who have been working on these their own personal projects for the past 5 years, 10 years, and usually most of them are also doing part-time jobs or full-time jobs on and off, and working on this side project, which is their big dream project, where it's always one project. So in between, someone mentioned that if you're working on a game, it isn't working out, put it aside, work on something else. So I was thinking, is it okay if you have multiple personal projects at the same time, and it's not like you're working on just one project at the same time, you're working on all of them in your part-time or after office hours, and you're kind of developing each of their designs side by side, but they're separate projects from each other. Is that a good idea to go by, or is it recommended that you should just focus on one project, see if that one works out, and don't get your head inside any other thing? Don't divide your attention in between all of these and just focus on one. Make sure if that doesn't work, in 2 to 3 months, 6 months, you'll know, and then just toss that aside and start another one. But don't do two at the same time.
Well,
What do you think?
from my perspective, I mean, like taking a lesson from like people I know who are screenwriters in Hollywood, writers, I think among a lot of the creative people I know, writers are especially where this is true. They've got many ideas they're working on, so like any particular screenwriter might have like 5 different scripts they're working on, and they're just they're playing around with ideas, and the scripts are at different stages of development, but then it's just kind of like, because of whatever their mood is or something, like one particular story kind of grabs their attention and they kind of want to run with that idea, and maybe they've got momentum, maybe their creative flow is working really well with that particular idea, so they just run with it. But a lot of people I know, like I know some indie developers who say, yeah, I've got like 4 or 5 ideas for games I want to make, but I'm working on this one because that's kind of where I have the momentum. And of course, it kind of reaches a threshold where you're like, okay, that's where I've decided this is the game I'm actually going to create and bring to market and get it out there. But I think it's fine. I actually think if you have the capacity to kind of compartmentalize your different projects, kind of work between them, I think it could actually be a good thing. Kind of going to our earlier point, how like ideas that you're putting into one game actually might help energize your thoughts about another idea you're working on. It's just a matter of capacity, but I think it's actually can be healthy to kind of have a few ideas floating around.
I agree with her, but I also want to add one thing. I think to sound more practical, it depends on where you are in life at that moment. Like for example, if you're only 16, 17, yeah, sure, work on 7 different ideas and concepts. But maybe you're 22, or you're a recent graduate. And if you have more of a responsibility, towards maybe like in Pakistan traditionally, you tend to think on the lines where you need to support your parents now, right? As opposed to when you were younger, whatever, right? But in abroad, it's different. You know, you're thrown out of the house when you're 18. You're basically told to do, you know, go earn yourself. But it's different here. So I'm talking from the perspective of here. Then no, then I wouldn't recommend you working on 5 different things while you're doing a part-time. And then I would say focus on one thing. Don't be a jack of all trades. Like for instance, for example, Elon Musk. He's working on like so many things, several things at a time, right? But that guy has billions of dollars. He does not need to worry about, you know, his next, I don't know, 10 generations, so to say, right? If they're gonna be hungry and, you know. So if you're at that point, yeah, sure. But living in Pakistan, I don't think that would be the right approach. I think that you should be very focused on what you're doing and try to be the best that you could possibly be at that particular thing. Yeah.
My question is specifically for Kate and Shayan. Being a game developer, or let's say game artists and game designers, mostly people like me look for how we can, in the near future, in the future, we can work for big studios such as Rockstar and Naughty Dog, which make bigger titles. Let's say, if it's your dream to be a part of such titles, so how can people, developers and game designers and artists from such third world country can make it that far? Thank you.
Well, in my view, it's like ultimately for companies like that, what they want is the talent. They don't care where you're from. You know, it's like, yeah, they might have to work out some work visa details and things like that, but ultimately, if you have the talent that they're looking for, they're gonna, you know, make an effort. The main thing is getting exposure of your talent. Like, how do you get exposure with like a company like Rockstar or wherever, where you've got thousands of people from around the world vying for a job at a company like that, and it's difficult, you know. So one of the techniques that I've often told students, for example, is, you know, look on LinkedIn or look, you know, try and connect with somebody who works at that company, and basically see if they would be willing to act as your mentor. You know, and say, and the way you often approach it is not like, please help me, I want a job. That's not the way to do it. It's more like, hey, excuse me. It's more like, hey, I really admire the work that you guys are doing at this company. I see that you work in the function that I'm hoping to do at some point, whatever that might be. You know, I've got a design doc, or I've got my portfolio. Would you mind giving me some advice and taking, giving me some advice on where I am with my skill level right now, because ultimately it'd be really great to work for a company like yours, and see if they'll engage. And a lot of times, like I said earlier, a lot of times people will. You know, it's not that they don't want to. It's a matter of just time. It's like, well, yeah, I would love to, but we're in the middle of crunching or whatever we're doing. I will do it eventually. So you might have to nag them a little bit. I mean, even my daughter, she's a costume designer. She's gotten a really good rapport with Sir Richard Taylor, who runs Weta Workshop in New Zealand. And how did she do that? Well, she met him at San Diego Comic-Con, but you know, New Zealanders are super nice people anyway, so they're very generous with their time. And he's offered, you know, he's given her advice, and she has followed up with like a couple of people around him. And you know, so every once in a while, you know, she actually kind of follows up with them and kind of says, hey. Because they actually told her, well, why don't you submit your materials to us? But see, the way Weta works is that if they start up a project like a new movie and they need people of that skill set, then they call you. They don't really have like openings for certain positions, so they kind of work a little differently. But the point being is that she made the connection and she got exposure of her skill, so they know what she can do. They know what she's capable of doing. And now it's like, who knows? Maybe she'll get a job there someday, maybe she won't. But the point is that she made the relationship, she got really great feedback on her skill, and then, you know, you never know what could happen from there. And so I think it's really important, though, to make that connection, because pretty much every job that happens in the game industry, especially at the large AAA studios, is done through networking. It's not done through submitting a resume to a website. It's because you met someone at a conference, or you connected with them online, and you had some kind of rapport with them that made them remember you when, like, they had a job opening in their department and said, oh yeah, that guy who has, I remember seeing his portfolio, or I saw whatever, and yeah, I think this is the kind of skill we need. But you have to make that connection. You have to kind of fight for a certain level of exposure, but you can't come off as being too desperate. Because then people are just like, oh my gosh, another job seeker. I don't need this.
I would say she put it really, like I think she put it really well. Why is because I sort of gave the same advice to someone a little while back. So here's how it is. For example, you reach out to some producer at Naughty Dog, right? XYZ, and you say, hey, you know what? I've been making this or I've been doing this. Can you take a look at it? I would say yes, do that, but don't try to show them something initially where you're trying to reinvent the wheel, where you're trying to come up with some crazy design and you're trying to get their attention, right? They don't care. They're really busy in building great games. Maybe the conversation starter could be like literally as simple as, hey, I played this game by you guys, and I feel like if you had added this to the game, then it would have been pretty insane. I don't know, something like that. There's a highly likely chance that they probably will respond to you then. They'll be like, yo, he actually likes our products, he's just not faking it. He understands. Do you know what I mean? So something like that. And then the third thing would be just follow up. Always follow up. Like she said, like her daughter, she got introduced to someone, and then someone who's, he's really famous. I don't know if you guys know him or not, but she then, took that opportunity and actually learned from it, and then I'm guessing she followed up, and then she met a lot of other people through him, whatever, how the process of networking works. Make sure you do that. There's a fine line between nagging and actually following up, so make sure you know that. You can't constantly ping them. Hey, you know what this, hey, this is this and that. Make sure you're just like asking them, from time to time, hey, you know what, this is the update from my side, I've come up with this. Then maybe you could say that. Maybe you can take a look at this and give me feedback, and maybe they will be willing to do that. And the fourth thing is come work with us, man. and the reason that I actually say that is because we have a really, really good retention rate. I think the people who have been working with us for the last, I don't know, decade, most of them are still with us. And people who started working with us in the last 6 or 7 years, they're still with us too. The only people that left were the people that we actually were like, you should go, because they got a better opportunity. For example, one guy got to go and work as a UI guy with Natural Motion, the guys who made CSR Racing. I mean, that's a one-in-a-life opportunity. Like coming from Pakistan, you're like, oh my God, he was that good, so he should have gone, and I'm glad that he's there, and he's doing really well. And some people this one guy went to Amazon, but it's come to a point where, we've built a name. I mean, I'm not saying we're not, massive or anything, but to an extent that now we have the power to approach someone and say, you know what, you should come work on the project that we're working. We recently pulled a guy from Amazon. And that guy is the guy who worked on, he wasn't the guy just on the team, but he was the lead for Photon, the guy who designed the whole entire thing. And now he's like our go-to backhand guy. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think you should ask Sadia a question too. She feels like she wasn't asked enough questions.
I don't want to answer this question. I just want to add one thing, though, that I often give this advice to my students. Like, I'm sure on professional level they have given a really good advice, but even on a student level, when you're just starting off, I just ask them to at least find 3 people they think them as their benchmark. Even if you're not connected with them, but you actually get to see what they're doing, put them as a benchmark what you want to become, so that actually you have some goal to achieve and you can actually start working. You won't be just like, I just looking, I want to work in AAA, but what you want to do in AAA? There's such a vast field, such a big world out there. So just find 3 people that you really get inspired from and make them as your benchmark, that's what we want to become. And then start working towards that line, follow them, see what they're doing, what they're learning, what they're working on, and I think that might help. And I also myself is always learning, because recently we started working in this product and I had no idea about how we have to manage all this. Our team got bigger and stuff. So I joined a bunch of product management and product designer, game designers groups and Facebook and everything. And I follow every day this post a lot of like learning articles, like we did this tool is so good, this thing is new good. So we get to learn everything, and then I find few people which were really good, and I wanted to make something like that, and I was like, okay, I want to be like something like these people are managing such nice and amazing products. So I just start following them, and I start seeing like what they are doing, what they're working on, what books they're reading, what they're posting. I read this book, I was like, I'm gonna read this book. So something like that, maybe that will help you as well.
I was just going to add something really quick that also just came to mind just now as she was talking. Is one of the trends that has come more evident in the last several years within AAA, because these are large companies and a lot of their products become somewhat specialized in terms of what they're producing, is that having kind of hyper specialization has become like a really attractive thing in potential candidates. Like if just having general skills is good, but a lot of times the reason they're hiring you is because you're really good at a certain thing, like really good at it, and that's why they're hiring you. I think most people know, or if you don't, like at Blizzard, for example, they have a couple of people and all they do is design weapons. They're weapons designers. That's actually their title. That's all they do is make weapons for the various games, and that's kind of a really cool job if you like weapons. So, but they're really good at it because they've got a lot of knowledge and they're super creative about how they do it.
My example is, well, what she just said exactly. There's a girl who started off with us in 2010, I believe, and she started off as QA, but she was actually passionate about art, not just because she thought she was. So she started working towards. She used to come to us and tell us, hey, I want to switch my job role, blah, blah, blah. She wasn't good enough at that point initially when she was starting out, but she really put in the hours. And when she got great, she eventually became an artist, a junior artist at our company, and then eventually she moved to Canada, and I forgot the company's name, but it's a pretty well-to-do company, and she got a job offer from there, and I was happy to tell her, you should go. And guess what she does there? So she's talking about weapon specialization. She actually designs monsters, like literally, and such cute little monsters, and she's been making them for quite a while. It's a game that like you literally tap a monster and they make these funny noises, but yeah, so she's literally sort of, well, I wouldn't say she's specialized in that. She started off from fantasy art, but she sort of understood how she could possibly make great looking monsters that are cute but also make sense. Do you know what I mean? So she put in those hours, and you guys should maybe do the same, and hopefully you'll end up at, I don't know, Rockstar, hopefully. Yeah. By the way, the guy who's the lead, a lot of people don't know this, on GTA, in terms of design, is he's got a Pakistani background, and he's been working with them for 17 years. Yeah, he's the top guy. He's one of the top guys. They haven't let go of him at all.
Any special announcements for the next year's GEC? Sorry, anything special that you probably thought?
Let this one finish, please. I haven't slept so many days. I haven't slept for so many days. So we have. So yeah, let's go for we have like to make announcement for the game showcase people, and we have to, so let's go to that area and we'll see that who is getting the awards.